I've got to put my fins back into my board for a surf trip I'm going on tomorrow. And I figured I'd share my experience with checking into my flight because it was a little alarming and a bit of a process. So I recently went on a surf trip to Costa Rica, and checking into my flight on the way back was a pain. Long story short, my wife was able to check in, but I wasn't. We had to show up to the airport early. There was this whole ordeal with a secondary security screening process. I'm going to share with you what my experience was like, what you can expect if this happens to you, and hopefully some ways to ease the anxiety if you're worried about what this is like. So I went to check into my flight the day before, and I was greeted by a message that said, unfortunately, government regulations require you to check in at the airport, either at the kiosk or with an agent for this flight. If this has happened to you, you've probably been selected for what is called the secondary security screening selection. After reading that, I was a little alarmed. I mean, it sounded like it was a somewhat routine message, but saying due to government regulations, I didn't know if there was an issue with my passport, if there was an issue with checking in, did they overbook the flight? I had no idea what was going on. So I called Delta and eventually got a representative on the line who also seemed confused as to why I was getting that message and didn't really seem to know what was going on. They did see that my wife had successfully checked in, and they didn't see that I had successfully checked in. While all this was going on and while I was on hold, I was doing some Googling and researching myself, so was my wife. We got to the airport and immediately went to the Delta check-in counter where we were greeted by who I assume would be their TSA or Border Patrol people. They were not affiliated with Delta, but they were definitely some sort of official government organization who ensured us that if we needed to check into our flight, we would have to go through them. And if you've ever been to the airport where they have the little digital kiosks, they had this roped off, and at the entrance to the check-in counter and the entrance to the kiosks, there were these, I'll call them Border Patrol TSA agents, standing there checking a list, I guess, of passengers that were also selected or also weren't able to check in online. They asked us a few questions regarding what were the contents of our luggage, if we were bringing anything back into the country that we shouldn't be, just very high-level, normal security questions, if you will. And after that, they let us check in. We got our boarding passes and checked our bags. Once we got our boarding pass, we went through security as normal. There were no issues there. Got to our gate, and we just hung out for a little bit before boarding started. As usual, they start with first class, which we were not flying first class, but they called my name along with 10 or 15 other individuals to board at the same time as first class. At first, I thought this was kind of exciting. I figured because I had some trouble earlier that they were going to let us board the plane early as a little bit of a bonus. That's not what happened at all. Once I scanned my boarding pass, I was greeted by another TSA agent who took me to another TSA agent, and this is where I guess that secondary security screening process started. I did not like the secondary security screening process. During this secondary security screening, they went through all the stuff in my bag. They made me take off my watch, my hat, my sunglasses. They made me take off my shoes, and I've never seen someone examine a shoe like this. The guy took my shoes, was putting them up like this, was going all down the seams of the shoes, looking in the tongues, checking like the stitching and everything. They really inspected a shoe more than I'd ever seen before in my life, which thankfully these were new shoes, so they didn't stink, but I definitely bet they smell some stinky shoes. So once you find out that you've been selected for this secondary security screening, it's actually noted on your boarding pass by 4 S's. I think it's on the top left and bottom right of your boarding pass. They told us that it was completely random. There were probably another 15 people that were also randomly selected. And it did seem random. There was young people, old people, men, women. The one thing I didn't see any children, but I have no idea if they would be selected or not. During this whole process, even though I was separated from my wife for a period of time and she wasn't allowed back to the security screening with me, It was just down the hall, so I could still see her at all times. She didn't have to board the plane without me. All in all, it was a pretty unique experience. It definitely created some travel anxiety the day of and day before. But in the end, it really wasn't a big issue. And if it happens to me again, I really wouldn't be concerned at all. And now I know what to expect. So if this does happen to you, I would definitely make sure to get to the airport a little bit early. Definitely pack efficiently because you're going to have to repack everything. But other than that, I wouldn't really worry about it.